Draft day is here. We've got one more pre-draft mailbag to go through, and it's all starting off with how I get to the Commanders having 7 picks when it's all said and done right now on Locked On Commanders.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up and welcome inside today's episode of Locked On Commanders. I am your host, David Harrison, here with you Monday through Friday, your friend, your eyes, your ears on the ground, covering the Washington Commanders for WUSA9.com and on SI. And I want to thank you for coming through today. Our final episode before the NFL draft begins. The next time you see me here on Locked On Commanders, we will have a first round. Can't guarantee we're going to have a first round pick. We're going to have a first round of the NFL draft. I want to thank you for coming through today for this mailbag episode. We're going to be talking about potential Hokies staying home. We're going to talk about early Rookie of the Year candidates, and we're starting it all off with trade talks, our final NFL draft mailbag of 2025 every day. As those of you who come through every single day, I want to give you a special thank you, as always, for coming through here. Anybody out there, if you're not already, please subscribe for free on YouTube or wherever you are listening to this episode right now. And if you're new to the show, just in time as we get ready for one of the most exciting weekends on the NFL schedule, thank you for finding the show. Locked On Commanders is a daily podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So thank you for coming. Hopefully you come back again soon. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. Terms and conditions apply. We're going to kick off this mailbag with a little bit of mock draft trade. Not a mock draft, mock draft trade. Our final mock draft dropped earlier this week. If you want to catch that and you haven't already, just go back in the timeline a little bit. You can catch that. And we actually had a bonus mock draft. So I guess that would technically be our final mock draft later on in the week. So 2 mock drafts dropped this week, technically 3 because the mock draft episode had 2. Yeah, we're getting a little extra here as we get to the final finish line. But mock draft trades is what we're going to talk about here at the beginning of this mailbag episode. Merle came through. Insider Merle, how many draft picks does Washington finish with in the draft? And what possible player could you see trading away during the draft? Merle, not the only one to ask about the players, but right now, right here, I want to focus in on how many picks. And from my estimation, I can see 7 picks. I think the Washington Commanders can come away with 7 picks, and it's not all that out of the ordinary or out of the reach of reality, right? So you start with, of course, number 29. The pick, the Washington Commanders pick in the first round, their first pick of the draft. For me, I said this earlier in the week, every day, you'll know this, but in case you haven't heard, edge rusher Donovan Ezeraku out of Boston College. He's kind of my only guy on the board that if he's there, you got to take him. You got to take him. There's no trades. You're picking them, and you'll worry about the rest of it later. Everybody else, even a guy like Nick Eamon-Warry out of South Carolina, who I'm higher on than I know some people are. I love the athletic traits. I believe the coaching staff can get more aggression out of him. Now, I will say that I've wavered on that stance just a little bit because my stance on it was Jeremy Chin coming over from Carolina. You ask Carolina folks, they'd say he wasn't really all that aggressive towards the end of his time there. Now, I know he was aggressive in his rookie season, played much more aggressively, confidently, all that stuff, but that kind of seemed to go away. He comes to Washington, that gets reinstalled. He really kind of came out of his own, or came out of his shell and into his own during the 2024 season. But I was reminded by a fellow media, remember when we were talking about this, because of course we talked about this, that Jeremy Chin at least had the aggression. You even go back to college, you see the aggressiveness in his play to come back out in Washington. Nick Eamon-Warry, though, you might be worried because you haven't really seen it. So you're assuming that it's there to even be drawn out. It may not be there at all. And I was like, you know what? That's a good point. And that's what the scouts will hopefully be able to determine for the Commanders. That's something that I can't really dive into, unfortunately, just from where we sit. But Nick Eamon-Warry, I'm still high on. Don't get me wrong. Trey Amos, cornerback out of Ole Miss, still really high on him. Running back Travion Henderson, still love him as well. But I just feel like at 29, nobody really fits the bill. I mean, that's going to be there, right? Like Adam Peters joked, if Abdul Carter slides, then we're going to take it. Yeah, if Abdul Carter makes it 29, of course he's on the list as well, right? So just talking about guys who are realistically, potentially, I should say, going to be there. Again, I've got friends on 2 different beats that are picking before the Commanders that tell me there's no way that he's making it past the team that they cover. Obviously, only one of them can get him, so we'll see what happens there. But yeah, if Ezeraku is there at 29, firmly for me, that's where they need to go. But if not, then I love the opportunity to potentially trade back number 33, and then the 4th round pick, 104 from the Cleveland Browns. That's the trade we made in the Locked On NFL mock draft special. However, you know what I mean? Quarterback conversation, like if the Giants want to move up, there's other teams that want to move up, potentially a bidding war. I mean, I think 67 is a little rich. Like, I don't know if that's really, realistic. Early 3rd round pick from the Cleveland Browns. You get their early 2nd, early 3rd. They move into the 1st round. If there's a bidding war and they want to do bad enough, maybe you can get that out of them. But I think more realistically, you're probably looking at their 3rd round pick, which is still the 3rd round pick, top 100 pick. So you're happy to take that as well. And then I think, especially if you get 67, like if you get 67, I think 61 basically immediately goes for sale. So just looking on Chad Reuter's 7-round mock draft for NFL.com, and that's the mock draft. If you hear me reference a mock draft, that's the one we're referencing is Chad Reuter's 7-round mock draft for NFL.com. But based on his mock, at 61, you're going to have prospects like wide receiver Savion Williams out of TCU, linebacker Carson Schlesinger out of UCLA, which is who Reuter actually has going to the Commanders, wide receiver Ty Felton out of Maryland, defensive tackle Darius Alexander out of Toledo, cornerback Benjamin Morrison out of Notre Dame, running back Caleb Johnson out of Iowa, cornerback Noel Williams out of Cal, D-tackle Josh Farmer out of Florida State, wide receiver Jaden Higgins out of Iowa State, and more. Like, that's a lot of prospects that you're going to have and more. So especially if you're able to get a bidding war going and you get 67 out of the Browns, now you may have to kick over a 6th-round pick back to them or something like that to make the math work a little bit better. But if you get 67, you're sitting at 61, and all those guys are available, I'm trading out at 61. You know what I mean? And hopefully, right, let's extend this quarterback conversation. 1 or 2 or a max 3 go in the 1st round. Hopefully you're trading 29 to a team that wants to get that 3rd quarterback in the 1st round. Now we want to trade 61 potentially to a team that wasn't able to get one of those first 3 or 4 quarterbacks, and they need to get in on the quarterback hunt before it dries out. At 61, a team like the Pittsburgh Steelers, very much so more in play to move up than, say, at 29, because Pittsburgh Steelers don't have a 2nd-round pick. Now, if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, what I think you should be doing is trying to move back, and then they have the 21st pick, if I remember correctly. You want to trade back from 21 if the quarterbacks are falling, trade back from 21 to, say, a 29. Not that I think the Commanders are going to try to trade up, but just for conversation's sake, move back, maybe get a 2nd-round pick out of that deal, then take your quarterback there at the end of the 1st round by trading back into the back in the 1st round instead of trading up into the 1st round like we're talking about here with some of these other teams. But if the Steelers miss out on that 1st-round quarterback, number 61, a guy like Tyler Shuck might be available. He certainly is available, I should say, at this point in Reuter's mock draft. So if the Steelers, we like Shuck, 83 to 61, still a little steep, but it's not as steep as 83 to 29. Now let's make this phone call and making the math work. If you're the Commanders, you can get 83, you could get 123, you get 156. Maybe you give them back 205 in the process. I tested this out on PFF. They accepted number 83, number 123, number 156 for number 61 straight up, no problems. So, I might even be underselling the Commanders a little bit here. And if that's the case, then now you're trading back twice. You're trading back from 29, you pick at 33, you trade back at 61, you pick at 67, or later, 83. And now you've got 7 picks in the NFL draft. It's not easy, right? I'm not saying it's like easy button, but I'm saying those are 2 avenues to adding more picks for the Washington Commanders that I think you could see going down, I wouldn't say very easily, but certainly realistically, right? So that's how we're going to open up the mailbag. We've got a couple more draft trade type questions coming up. We do have the question of which players could be traded, but also which position group will we be most surprised to see the Commanders pick in the 1st round, and then just overall. All of that coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Commanders is brought to you by Monarch Money. Have you ever checked your bank account and wondered aloud, where did all my money go? I'm telling you, I've been there. So if you've been there, don't feel like you're alone. In fact, the fact that you're not alone is why companies like Monarch Money even exist. Between dining out, online shopping, entertainment, it is easy for anybody to lose track of their spending. That's where Monarch Money comes in. They're your personal chief financial officer, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. But Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's complete financial command center for you to get track of all your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place. So you stop just managing your money, but also start building some wealth. When I started using Monarch Money, I realized just how much I spent on DoorDash, which I kind of knew I was already high on the DoorDash angle. I didn't realize how high I was on the door dashing. Okay. Now I budget that a little bit more, pack my lunch a little bit smarter, things like that. Take control of your finances like I did with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Today's episode is also brought to you by Game Time. With the NBA playoffs here, there is nothing quite like the experience at an NBA playoff game. My DC locals, I really hope that we can all take in a Wizards playoff game sooner rather than later. But wherever you are, if there's an NBA team near you in the playoffs, every bucket, every defensive stop, every moment can feel huge. Even if you're a Wizards fan somewhere else, go see a playoff game anywhere. There's just fun environments to be in. It's electric in the arena. And with Game Time, you can be a part of it without the stress of last-minute ticket hunting. Game Time makes it fast and easy to get your playoff tickets, even when the demand is sky high. And the prices actually go down as tip-off gets closer. And their last-minute deals can save you up to 60%. Those 60% off deals for last-minute sports also apply to concerts, comedy, and theater. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create your account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create your account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Continuing now, today's pre-draft mailbag episode of Locked On Commanders. Dr. Wonderful coming through. What player or position would you be most surprised for Washington to select, and why? I think I'm gonna do this two ways. I'm gonna do first round specific, and then I'm gonna do overall. First round, I think the position I would be most surprised, and obviously the position that's overall, I would also be surprised in the first round. But I think of the positions that could be drafted in the first round, that I would be most surprised to draft in the first round, if that makes sense, would be guard. Not that I don't think competition is healthy everywhere. I think Sam Cosmi is pretty solidified when healthy. I think Andrew Wiley, Trent Scott, Brandon Coleman, like there's certainly a good amount of dudes to come in and compete for that replacement job if they even need it, right? Sam Cosmi certainly not ruled out yet for any part of the season. That's just kind of my, I don't even know what it's called, like overestimating of injury recovery time potentially. But on the other side, Nick Allegretti, I think Nick Allegretti did a really good job. Really solid lineman. I really like what he brings to the team, his energy, his intensity, all that stuff. However, and in the spirit of competition and the opinion of competition, unless you got like an all-pro sitting there or an all-pro caliber dude sitting there, you bring in competition for him. Nick Allegretti certainly hasn't been to that level yet. I think he could get there, and potentially bringing in a guy to challenge him could put him there. Now, you draft a guard in the first round, that dude's got to start at some point, right? Again, we talked about this before. Like the PR nightmare of having a first round pick that never starts is just not something that GMs usually want to weather. Now, if there is a GM that would be willing to weather that, it could be Adam Peters. Like Adam Peters might be okay 2 years from now, stand at the podium. Hey, do you feel like you wasted that pick on that guard? Be like, nah, man, we got a really great backup. And we have an all-pro here in Nick Allegretti that at the time wasn't an all-pro, but then he turned into all-pro. And who knows, if we don't bring this pick in, maybe he doesn't turn into an all-pro. Like it's a great problem to have a really good backup that you probably trade for some capital and an all-pro starting ahead of him. You know what I mean? But I think guard would probably be the biggest surprise for me, to be honest with you. I don't think that Tyler Booker or Gray Zabel, the two interior offensive linemen that are expected to be there, Booker from Alabama, Zabel from North Dakota State, would be on that list of guys where if they're there, we're taking them. We're not listening to trades. And I just feel like the phone is going to ring at number 29. So that's where I would be surprised there. Overall, actually, I think tight end would probably be the most surprising. I mean, take nothing off the table, right? Especially as you get later, like a 6th round, 7th round tight end coming in. I mean, that there's no problem there. Like I'm not going to sit there on day 3 and be like, whoa, man, mind blown. They took a tight end. But if I had to pick one position where, you're telling me this is the spot that they're going to come out without a player in the NFL draft, I think I would go tight end on there. So good question from Dr. Wonderful. Mark came through. Have there been any rumblings of players we'd trade away over the weekend? Daron Payne is the one that sticks out in my mind. Yeah, most of the rumblings are coming from the media. Certainly coming from the fan base, and we call it speculation, right? Like nothing from inside the team. Like nobody's come up to me in the hallway and whispered like, hey, Daron Payne's not going to be on the team anymore. Nothing's going on like that, right? But Daron Payne does continue to be the center. It was John Allen for a couple years. I think John Allen and Daron Payne a little bit. Now it's Daron Payne as the primary guy that everybody's talking about as a trade target. And the guy that everybody's whispering about behind him now is Brian Robinson Jr. or Austin Eckler, basically one of the running backs. So with Daron, look, it's disappointing when you see a guy kind of like not really have the great start to his career. Contract year comes in, balls out, gets the new deal and then it kind of goes back to the mean, right? Kind of goes back to what it was before. And it does. It just makes it look like he was only putting in that effort to get that contract. And look, that happens at times. Now, truthfully, I don't believe that's what's happening with Daron. You know what I mean? I don't think that he just kind of like phoned it in after getting paid. Like, I don't think that's kind of dude that Daron Payne is. But, the production is what everybody is focusing on, obviously. And if the Commanders don't feel like Daron Payne is really made for the future of this team, you could just let him walk after the season as a free agent, but you could also try to trade him in the weekend and get some draft capital out of him. Or they could do kind of what they do with Jahan Dotson, like bring in whoever they're going to bring in for the draft, bring in the free agents that they've already brought in, get to camp, see what's what. And if Daron kind of isn't stepping it up a notch, then we go ahead and make a trade during training camp preseason and maybe get some of that future draft capital back for next year, right? I don't think you're getting like that second round pick back, but maybe you get that fourth round pick back next year by trading Daron Payne during the preseason. The other one, Brian Robinson Jr., Austin Eckler. And then when you look at it, Brian Robinson Jr., if you're willing to trade one or both your running backs, Brian is one that brings you back the most capital. I think you might be able to get a third if there's a team that really believes that he's a great fit for them, has the skill set, and there's a few teams asking about him. Maybe you can get like a compensatory third, probably most likely looking at a fourth, even a fifth. He's on an expiring contract. Whoever trades for him is going to have to sign him if they want to keep him, type of thing, right? So you're not getting like a ton of draft capital for him. Austin Eckler, veteran. I mean, he's a good veteran, but he's a veteran. He's older. He's not going to be your primary guy. I don't know what the market would look like for him. And then there's a question too, like, a lot of people, this has been connected to, well, the Commanders go ahead and they get Travion Henderson, number 29, or Travion Henderson, 33, or Travion Henderson, 61. Wherever they get him, Travion Henderson has kind of taken over as the favorite back of the Commanders fan base, at least the ones that I'm hearing talk. You get Travion Henderson, then you want to trade one of these running backs because now you've got a crowded running back room, right? Well, there is something to be said about Austin Eckler, the veteran, being the one that stays versus the younger guy staying. So you have a veteran leader in the room, veteran voice in the room. And don't forget, Austin Eckler is an Anthony Lynn guy. Anthony Lynn, running backs coach, offensive run game coordinator. Certainly he's going to have a say as well. Jeremy McNichols is a vet, so certainly he could be there. But Jeremy McNichols has never had the burden of being like the guy. Austin Eckler is going to know how to help Travion or whoever would be, a Marion Hampton maybe out of North Carolina, carry that weight, but also be there to play a supportive role. As well. I don't know how much Brian Robinson Jr. would be open to playing a supporting role. I'm not saying he wouldn't. I just don't know what that would be because we've never had to see him in that situation outside of his rookie year where, I mean, obviously you're playing a supporting role, at least coming up, and then he earned the starting job before, unfortunately, having to miss the beginning of the season. So another good question there. Another great question here. Dr. Wonderful coming in for another one. I think we have one more inside that had another one in this mailbag as well. At some point, Dr. Wonderful says, I'd like to know your rookie of the year candidates. And obviously it's a little bit early, but I never stray away from that. Defensively, I think it's kind of easy. Abdul Carter, you know what I mean? It looks like he's either going to the Cleveland Browns where he's going to be playing opposite Myles Garrett, which means he's not going to get as many double teams and all that stuff as he might somewhere else, or the New York Giants. And I know we all kind of laugh at the New York Giants, last place in the NFC East, but don't forget, they did have a really good defense and their pass rush has kind of always been their strong suit. So Abdul Carter going to New York, where again, you've got Dexter Lawrence, you've got some other players they've got to worry about there. Abdul Carter is going to be able to get some one-on-ones and do some things there against other teams. So I think no matter where Abdul Carter goes, probably going to be the favorite to be a defensive player, or rookie of the year, I should say. Offensively, that's where things can get a little convoluted. Dr. Wonderful says that a running back could take it, and honestly, I don't disagree. The last running back to win Offensive Rookie of the Year was Saquon Barkley. The last non-first round Rookie of the Year was Alvin Kamara, another running back. He was drafted in the third round in 2017, so he's the last non-first round player to win Offensive Rookie of the Year. Offensive Rookie of the Year isn't such a quarterback award as some other awards are. So like Cam Ward, number 1 to the Titans, I don't think that's like a slam dunk unless the Titans have some sort of a Commanders-esque rise. I don't necessarily see that happening, which I don't, so I don't really see Cam Ward being a competitor there. Using Chad Reuter, 7-round mock again. And again, we can readdress this once the draft is actually set and we know where these guys are actually going. But Ashton Jeanty, Ashton Jeanty to the Patriots. I think that's really interesting because the amount he's gonna be able to help Drake May and all that stuff and how they're, trying to revamp their offense could be very interesting. He certainly has the talent to do it. I'm actually going to go with my pick right now would be tight end Tyler Warren going to the Indianapolis Colts. They still have a pretty decent run game, not great quarterback play there, but we also saw Brock Bowers have a really great season Like if Jaden Daniels didn't have the great season he had, Brock Bowers would have been the rookie of the year without great quarterback play and without a lot of weapons around him to detract, right? So tight ends kind of have just that ability. And I think Tyler Warren could be that for the Indianapolis Colts. Plus, playing in the AFC South, not a lot of great defenses there. I think the Houston Texans probably have the best defense in that division. So if you do well against the Texans in those two games, gives you a little bit of hype there. So I think Tyler Warren is probably going to be my favorite. As for running backs, Marion Hampton to Denver is a really good move. Sean Payton knows how to utilize those running backs. Again, Alvin Kamara was a rookie of the year, under Sean Payton. So I think that kind of speaks for itself. And with Bo Nix there and some of the weapons they have and the evolution of their offense, like I think that if I had to pick a running back, I'd probably actually go a Marion Hampton to Denver out of the first round crop there. So some really interesting stuff, some really interesting projections. Coming up, some other projections, fits for specific players. We have two more questions from insiders that want to know where specific players, how they might fit with the Washington Commanders this draft weekend. That's coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Commanders is brought to you by LinkedIn. As a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5. Your business is always on your mind, which means when it's time to hire, you need a partner that works just as hard as you do. That is where LinkedIn Jobs comes in. When you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in. LinkedIn makes it easy for you to post your job for free, share it with your network, and get qualified candidates all in one place. Post your job. Using LinkedIn's new feature, you can help write your job descriptions and then quickly get your job in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. And here's a pro tip. Add the hashtag hiring frame to your profile picture to double your reach to qualified candidates. No wonder 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn helps them find high quality hires. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Wrapping up today's mailbag episode, our final mailbag episode before the NFL draft, kicking off tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern. If you are watching the NFL draft from home, I will be on WUSA 9 starting at 7 o'clock tonight, live with Chick Hernandez and Linnell Willingham as part of WUSA 9's draft coverage, pre-draft show. So make sure you come through for that. We're actually doing that again on Saturday at 7 p.m. as well. So all that again on WUSA 9. You can stream it online or you can watch it on your handy dandy television at WSA9.com or just on the channel that you get WSA9 on. Insider Merle came through. Second question from Merle today. He said, not really a question. Merle's telling me what to do. Merle's like, bro, you work for me. You have to take a look at Braden Swinson. He fits DQ's defense perfectly. Well, Merle, you told me to do it, so I did it. Edge rusher Braden Swinson, LSU, 6'4", 255 pounds, third or fourth round projection, according to Lance Zierlein's NFL.com scouting report. However, the 181st pick in the 6th round, according to Chad Reuter's 7-round mock. So again, projections, mocks, they don't always see eye to eye, right? Braden Swinson, who is he? Long arms with a growable frame. He's already got a decent frame, 6'4", 255, but he's got room to grow as well still. Has those long arms. You love having those, especially in your pass rusher. Competitive spirit shows up on the tape. 3-4 outside linebacker is kind of what he looks like. Not as quick, not as dynamic as a Dante Fowler Jr., right? But certainly can kind of fit the mold there. Reacts as a pass rusher more than he plans. That's something that Lance Zierlein pointed out. So when I went in to watch him, I kind of was like, okay, I see what you're saying here. Definitely likes to let the tackle make the first move or the tight end make the first move. Doesn't usually come in with that kind of direct plan of here's what I'm going to do. So that's where he's going to need to grow his game intellectually. Not super dynamic, like I said, like a Dante Fowler Jr. Don't think that. More of a heavier runner, a little bit slower, right? No primary moves because of that lack of planning. So if he can get a little bit quicker, right? Like he's still very productive despite the lack of quickness. But really, if he can just come in with a plan, and like I said, Darryl Tapp, Sharif Floyd, Ryan Kerrigan, I think those guys can all help him do that kind of thing. And in the 6th round, like I look at his tape, and I kind of agree with Lance Zierlein. I think like 4th, maybe like early 5th. So if the 6th, if he's there in the 6th, I have no problem with that. Seth came through. I go to Virginia Tech, and I just want to ask your thoughts on our guys this draft cycle. I think it's a fair question. Virginia Tech has a lot of people in this draft. I've already watched. Before we even sit down and talk about this mailbag, I had already watched 1, 2, 3, 4 of these guys. I hadn't watched all 6 that we're about to talk about, but I had watched 4 of them. We do have 6 guys. I can't give you full breakdowns on each of them, so we are going to move through these a little bit quicker than we usually talk about these guys. But starting with wide receiver Jaylin Lane, projected to go number 47 overall in the 2nd round to the Cardinals. Again, all of this, Chad Reuter, 7-round mock draft. 5'10", 191 pounds, highly athletic, 4.34 40-yard dash. You love the speed. Number 7 on our explosive receiver big board that we did earlier this offseason. Would like him more if he wasn't as short as he is and he wasn't projected to mostly be limited to slot work. I like guys who can kind of move around a little bit, but he is kind of projected at the slot a little bit more than I would like. Still wouldn't hate the pick. Defensive tackle Aeneas Peebles, number 87, third round to the Bucks, 6'1.5", 282 pounds, work ethic, well-known, off the tape. You see it, constant energy on the field, has some tools. Overall, doesn't measure up to really being an effective NFL DN or D lineman. Like if you just look at the size measurements, like 6'1.5", not really usually going to cut it. I think third round is a little rich for him going to the Bucks there. But he's probably the only guy that I'm kind of like, I don't know if I like the Commanders as a fit for him. Running back, Bashul Tootin, number 119, fourth round to the Bengals, 5'9", 206 pounds, super athletic running back with explosive written all over him and return potential. Number 4 on our explosive back big board. Did have some fumble issues in college that need to get cleaned up. Would come in as the third back, again, pending any trades of Austin Eckler or Brian Robinson Jr., but could earn more of a role as the year went on. Again, brings that special teams ability as well, and then certainly was going to challenge for a dual back system, dual back reps in 2026. Cornerback Dorian Strong, number 171 in the fifth round to the Patriots, 6'1", 185, long press corner, effective in zone, but is most fluid in coverage isn't the most fluid, I should say, in coverage off the line of scrimmage. Strength and physicality and press doesn't show him as much in the run defense, but the strength and physicality is there. So he's just got to be taught how to translate. I would love Dorian Strong in the fifth round if the Commanders took him there. Edge rusher Antoine Powell-Ryland, number 186, sixth round to the Jets, 6'3", 258, smart dude, a very varied type of pass rusher, 25.5 sacks in the past 2 years. Lacks explosive traits, but is very aggressive, very physical. He and Swinson are kind of in the same ballpark for me. I think I like Powell-Ryland just a little bit more. The wide receiver Daquan Felton went undrafted in Reuters mock draft. This is a dude I actually really like. He's one of the guys that I actually watched. 6'5", 213, 4.5 speed. Just to put it in reference, like that's about the size Mike Evans was coming out of Texas A&M and faster than Mike Evans. So, there's some traits there to work with. Size is a big plus. Red zone target, really good UDFA target, or even late seventh. Like I wouldn't hate seeing them spend that late 7th round pick for him, so we don't have to negotiate. We don't have to compete against other player or other teams. He's a team captain at Vatech, so you really like that part of his, personality as well. Final question, Dr. Wonderful, not really a draft question, but regarding player development, what improvements would you like to see this year from Ben Sinnott? AP was asked about Ben Sinnott, Johnny Newton, and Jordan McGee, specifically in the press conference, said those 3 guys have been, quote, been working their tails off. That quote unquote. Ben Sinnott, look, versatile athlete, solid pass catcher and receiver. Where he needed to grow the most coming out of Kansas State was as a pass blocker. And in fact, Cliff Kingsbury actually kind of talked about that a little bit during the course of the season. So again, we'll have to see once we get into OTAs, veteran mini camps, all that stuff. But that is where you see kind of like Cole Turner, like Ben Sinnott, more versatile, more explosive than Cole Turner. But as a pass blocker, that's kind of where like run blocking, dude will like run downhill and hit you like a linebacker. Pass blocking is a little bit more nuanced, a little bit more technique to it. So I think that's where you want it, because you don't want to put Ben Sinnott on the field and everybody kind of knows this is either a run or a pass where he's not blocking and staying in if it's a pass. Final thing here before we get out of here, Maurice came through and asked a question for after the draft about players that could come in on one-year options post-draft. Typically, those are only UDFAs. There are occasionally some veterans, though. So after the draft, Maurice, we will go through and we will talk about those potential targets. But that is going to wrap us up for the NFL draft. Again, the next time you speak to me I speak to you on Locked On Commanders will be coming after the first round of the NFL draft. If you want to talk to me again before that, we are having a 5 p.m. Eastern time on or about 5 p.m. Eastern time Zoom for insiders. So if you want to be a part of that, go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. Become an insider before 5 p.m. You'll get that link and we'll be able to chop it up about the NFL draft while I head to Ashburn to do my duties for the evening. For your next listen, check out the Locked On NFL mock draft. Last time to get your insights on all those projections, all those picks, see who I picked for the Commanders, what I did for the Commanders, and tell me how much you love it or hate it. As always, thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day every day. Thanks for coming through every dayers like you always do. Everybody out there, enjoy the first night of the NFL draft, and I will speak to you again very, very soon right here on Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.